the hell that I was in, I'd do anything to be better.
I thought like a lunatic.
You gotta just have like that little bit of hope that it will get better. You're gonna make it.
This began my surrender.
I am a witness of my own growth.
It's a life beyond your wildest dreams, and I just have to say, it works if you work it.
My story, that's what I share.
You're listening to Far From Finished, a weekly podcast where we share new, real-life stories of hope and triumph, told by the people who live them. Today's story comes to us from...
Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Justin. I'm 25 years old. I've been in recovery about 115, 120 days now. I was born in New York and raised in Connecticut. Single mother, only child. Grew up great life, middle class. Had everything I wanted. My mother was a great provider for me. As a young kid, I was kind of a daredevil. I always liked to, do fast things, jump off of high places. Stayed out of trouble for the most part. Middle school, I started acting out a little bit. Just sort of having fun by not following the rules. Sort of, I guess, the starting point of everything. Middle school, experimented with like weed and alcohol and painkillers by the end. In high school, I partied a lot. I learned that I was really good at partying, and so I sort of made that my thing. And that carried on into college. I went to college in Rhode Island. I studied psychology. I actually did graduate with a bachelor's, but just barely. I partied the whole time, drinking and drugs recreationally. There was always something missing, I guess. I always needed something different to sort of feel like myself. And so I found that through drugs and alcohol and, being the best partier I could out of my friends. After college is kind of when things got bad for me. I wasn't happy about graduating. I didn't want to come back home, so I turned to drugs. And my drugs of choice became Percocets, painkillers, stuff like that. And that's where I sort of segued into my addiction. It progresses quicker than you sort of expect. One day I realized that I really needed these painkillers to feel okay and keep going. And then once I went back home to Connecticut, I switched over to heroin. Up north, it's powder, so I was snorting it for a while, and then I moved on to intravenous, and so that's when things got bad. At first, I'd be able to cover it up. I'd hang out with my drug friends and go buy my drugs and use them, and then I'd go hang out with my quote-unquote good friends, the normal people who weren't drug addicts. But after a while, it became more and more unmanageable. I'd have plans with people, but I would have to go get my stuff first. And, pretty soon it would turn into me showing up 3-4 hours late to whatever the plans were, to me finally not showing up at all. I wanted to hide from everybody. I didn't want anybody to see what I looked like when I was dope sick. And then when I got high, I just wanted to be able to use and hang out, and I'd sometimes go out, but most of the time I wouldn't have any money to go do anything social because I'd spend it all on drugs, and it really just spiraled out of control, to the point where I wouldn't want anyone to see me. If I was at a gas station, I was just sort of ashamed. I would, hadn't showered in 3 days. I'd be all greasy with like blood on my sweatpants, and I just basically want, to be by myself. It's really not a fun thing. And that's sort of what's led me a little bit to why I went to treatment in the first place. At first, I wanted to do it on my own. I didn't want to have to admit defeat. So I started off with seeing a shrink and being prescribed medicine for the withdrawals and to stay off of opiates. And that worked out for a while. At first, my main goal was to stop doing heroin so I can start hanging out with my friends again and be able to go out to the bars and, be a normal guy. And that worked for a while. But probably 6 months down the road, living like that, I started going back to using drugs recreationally, like cocaine or or Molly, and eventually it just led to one day I partied way too hard the night before. I really felt crappy, and I went back to using heroin. So there, I definitely can't call it being sober. It wasn't at all. It was just me trying to stay away from heroin, which I learned it doesn't work like that for me. So finally, I went to an IOP, and that worked for a little while. Anyone who doesn't know, IOP is intensive outpatient. You go for a couple hours a day, a couple days a week. And that worked for a while, but again, I wasn't really dealing with my issues. I was just removing myself from the drugs and alcohol. And so eventually my issues would creep back up and the use would come back. So finally, I had been going to this IOP and I had been using and giving dirty urines. And finally I called the guy up one day and I said, I don't know if there's any reason for me to come tonight. I'm going to give you guys, my third dirty urine. You're going to kick me out because I'm not staying clean. I need something more. I think I'm ready, to admit defeat, basically, and admit my powerless to my addiction and go seek more intense treatment. So he gave me the number to the American Addiction Center. And so I called them, and probably 30 hours later, I was on the way to the airport to come to Texas from Connecticut. And when I first got here, my plan was to just do my 30 days, get out quick, and go back home. But the more my head got clear, the more I learned and sort of saw that might not be the best for me to go right back into my old environment. I started paying attention more in the program. I became more receptive to AA, which I wasn't a fan of the 12 steps at first. The whole God thing scared me. But learning more about higher power and stuff, which I can talk about in a little bit and how I got over that. It sort of helped me get through it. And then I came to an outpatient program through the same American Addiction Center. And after that, I got into an Oxford house, which is sober living. I live with a group of guys. And it's really helped a lot, but the main thing was I had to admit that I couldn't do it myself and realize, how stupid it is to think it's a failure to go to treatment because I'm finally giving up that I can't do it myself, but not think it's a failure that I keep going back to using heroin. So I just sort of had to get over myself to be able to get here. I went from not being able to work, never having any money, never wanting to be social, to now I live in an Oxford house with a great group of guys. And being in that Oxford house, we have to go to at least 3 meetings a week. So I've been doing that. I've met a huge community of sober people my age, which that was something that always held me back. I figured I'd be the only 25-year-old that isn't going to the bar or smoking weed or doing whatever. And I've come to learn that there's hundreds of people just in my area that are doing the same thing, and it is possible to go out and have fun and be sober. I got a great job with somebody I actually met in treatment. He has his own company, and when I got out, he offered me a position. It's a company with a lot of people in recovery. And everything has really been looking up, and just being in recovery doesn't make everything okay. I still have some problems from my addiction. I was arrested maybe a couple months before I decided to do inpatient, which actually that was one of the factors that led me over here. So that's still open. Possession of narcotics case, and there's a few other things that I've done that might be coming up soon, charges, but it's just something that I've learned that, working with the program and having a support group, really no matter what gets thrown my way, I know that, I'll have to deal with it and life will go on. I've met people here that have been to prison for 5 or 10 years, and now they're out and they still have a life to live, and so that gives me hope that really no matter what comes of these issues, that I can overcome them as long as I just keep staying sober and sticking to the program. So all in all, life is pretty fucking good right now. I'm happy about it. First of all, doing it on your own, it is possible. There are people that do it, but it's very, very hard to do that. Just removing yourselves from the drugs and alcohol, that isn't the problem we have. The drugs and alcohol were our solution to our problems, and so therefore, being able to take a look at why we use helps you to start getting in the door of getting help, and doing that on your own is really hard. So treatment in general, I definitely recommend. Don't let your head be too big like mine was, holding me back for so long. I could have done this a year and a half, 2 years ago if I had just been willing to accept that it's okay to go to treatment, just as quickly as I was willing to accept that it's okay to only do drugs sometimes, which, wasn't working out for me. If you do go into treatment, temporary sponsors in AA and NA and CA and all that. There's somebody that helps you walk the lines of the program with you. They bring you through the steps. You call them for advice. The reason why I say temporary sponsor in treatment is because that's how I got into my Oxford house. The guy that was my sponsor when I was in treatment, when I got out, he had an opening in his Oxford house in the sober living, and just making that connection with him while I was in treatment sort of led me to be able to go to my next step a lot easier. For like AA and NA, don't let that word God deter you. My first day in treatment, we did an AA meeting, and at the end they say this prayer, and it's the Our Father prayer, and I was like, what the is this? Like, I'm this Jewish kid sitting here saying, the Our Father prayer, like, this is not for me. And it's just, the God thing, it deters a lot of people, but all it really is the higher power I said earlier. You just have to be willing to believe that there's something out there that's greater than Justin. There's something out there that's just created us. It doesn't even have to be, there's just some force out there bigger than us people. And if you're willing to believe it, you don't even have to, but you have to be willing to believe that somebody else who believes it worked for them, it might work for you too. So don't let that deter you. It was a stupid reason for me to stay away for a long time, and because of organized religion, God gets a bad rep, but the AA, NA community, it's not affiliated with a religion. It's a spiritual sense. It's not the religious sense that we always think of God. Oxford House, sober living, huge reason why I'm still sober. If I had gone home, I know probably 90% chance that I would go back to using. When I first got to treatment, I was already planning, when I get home, I know that there's still needles I have hidden places. I still have those guys' numbers. I could call them up, in a week or two after I get back. So sober living just, one, kept me from being able to go home. It gave me this awesome opportunity to live halfway across the country, which, I would not have gotten as easily without getting into this program. And it's given me the life I've had today. Everybody I met that's in recovery, all my friends now, are through the Oxford House, through the meetings that I go to. It's this huge support group, which is, huge. Just having all these people around, on days where I might feel like I'm down, just knowing that this life I have now with all these people, it's worth to keep going and worth to keep working at. So it gives you that extra accountability that you wouldn't get just being home on your own. Total sobriety. I know that scares people. It still scares me. But as I said earlier, those 6 months where I wanted to quit so I could go back to the bar, it didn't really work out. Some people are able to do it, but it's playing with fire. Now, do I know that I will never be or that I'll always be sober for the rest of forever. I don't know. I hope so. But I do know right now that I have to abstain from everything. Otherwise, I will go back to my addiction quickly. And it's always faster and harder than the last time. So definitely total sobriety, at least in the beginning. But probably a good idea for us if you are an actual alcoholic or drug addict, which I can't diagnose anybody that. You have to do it yourself, but probably good idea to stay away from all mind-altering substances. So I think those are, the main tips I have. Just don't be scared to reach out to people, man. You're not worried about what people think when you're out there partying and stuff, but then all of a sudden we get worried what people will think if we want to get help. And it's just this backwards way that we think. And, for a lot of people, it's life or death. And I can truly say that, my life has improved 100%. And I'm really grateful to American Addiction Centers for what they've done for me. It's been a huge change in my life and something that I want to keep going. It's been so long since I've felt, myself in my own skin, and it's cool watching, my personality come back, my energy come back, my confidence come back, it's all come back, and, it's a great thing. Just to everybody out there, good luck, and if you put the hard work in, things do materialize, so definitely don't be scared. Have a good one.